very quickly move on to our next session. I know that this is a session that many of you have been waiting for. So for this session, which will be moderated by Harshil Mathur, the CEO and co-founder of Razorpay, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome to this stage Mr. Dilip Aspe, MD and CEO of the NPCI, a man at the heart of India's digital payments revolution, man whose team built UPI. Please welcome them both to the stage.
Thank you, everyone. I know this is the session a lot of you have been looking forward to. While Dilip needs no introduction, I'll just quickly try to cover it. He's the man single-handedly behind India's fintech growth and the leapfrogging of India fintech to the next level. He's played an amazing role in designing, building, operationalizing, and managing large-scale payment systems, right from our favorite UPI to Bharat Bill Pay to Bheem to IMPS to RuPay, and I don't know how much more, right? So he's a formidable leader. He has ensured the delivery processing of more than 1 billion transactions a month. And all the scale that we see and we spoke about today on India payments and India fintech, in whatever shape and form it comes through, has mostly been driven with the efforts of NPCI with Dilip at its helm. So thanks a lot, Dilip, for joining, and we're all looking forward to hear you.
So this looks like an NPCI event, yeah. All NPCI leaders are here. You don't have, you're not given any branding to NPCI.
No, we would love to. Next time we'll actually put in. See, we can't talk about fintech without talking to NPCI, right? Like, I think whatever we speak about, a lot of it is being driven. And I'll start with one simple thing, right? Like, we see digital payments everywhere now. We see a QR code everywhere. We see POS devices everywhere. We see UPI ubiquitously everywhere. We have BBPS. How do you see changes on the ground, Dilip? You're closest to it. You are seeing a lot of this growth come from tier 2, tier 3. How do you think it has impacted the economy at its core?
See, for sure, I think the digital payments have created that, if I have to call superset in terms of people who are on the digital. But I still believe that the tipping point in the digital payment, a true network effect is yet to arrive, in my assessment, right? And both online as well as offline. And I think overall, we are sitting on a 10x growth is what we are looking at. And I believe that, and while we look at the cash data, we see, based on the RBI data, we see that there is a small decline on the lower denomination currency. But I still believe that, the final impact on digital payments, which should be in the reduction in the circulation of cash or cash to GDP ratio. And we are still at 13%, right? Something like that. And I believe that the 10x growth can bring it back to the single digit cash to GDP ratio. And that is the time we could fully articulate the value of speed of payments or velocity of payments, what we call about, compared to the cash to the digital economy.
It's interesting that you bring that out. Like, I think a lot of people keep talking about how digital payments has grown a lot and it's reached a point of saturation, it's now everywhere. Is there more growth to achieve? And you say there's still 10x growth possible. So are there any specific...
No, 10x growth is going to happen, for sure. It's not possible. It will happen. I think the question is, and it's a great time in our journey, your journey, our journey, you're still very young. But I think that, witnessing this journey from X to 10x is going to be more exciting than the journey till now, in my assessment.
That's amazing, and I completely agree with that. What would be interesting if we can hear, like, on what areas do you think that growth will happen? Like, or are there any specific type of payments do you think have unsolved for? Any specific type of transactions that are yet to be solved for? Like, there are a lot of young folks in the crowd who are starting fintech businesses or just scaling fintech businesses. They'd love to hear from your vantage point, what areas do you think that there's still a lot of opportunity?
So, for example, I think the one big area of opportunity of conversion of cash to CBDC, I think that's one big area. RBI has started efforts on that. And there is the people who want to still deal with cash, but they don't have a digital means and they are working on physical. I think the CBDC can be a great option to them. Okay. The second is, in my assessment, the recurring payments is a great opportunity, and we have not even started working on that. We are, at this stage, we are doing 1 million mandates, incremental mandates a month. Mandates, you understand what mandate is. For a country where 500 million digital payments happening, we are doing 1 million mandates a month. I'm just saying, 500 million a day
Yeah.
for a million mandates a month. I'm just saying it's ridiculous, right? I'm just saying that the mandates can grow as high as 100x in my assessment. So that is the second area. The third area is international. I believe the international payments are going to explode with UPI, remittance. I'm talking about everything. The third thing which I speak about is the context-based contextual payments. You know, whether you look at EMI or credit, you know, I think the huge growth is possible in that. So I think all these areas will contribute back to raise up the base.
No, those are some really amazing viewpoints, especially some of the areas around contextual payments is something I think you've spoken about before as well. And that's an area that I think we still need to solve a lot on.
Actually, I keep talking about it because, you know, then I'm telling myself only so that, you know, NPCI delivers something.
So we learned how innovation works for you, right? I think an interesting thing that people talk about a lot is digital public infrastructure, right? And it is a conversational point globally now. And I think UPI is a perfect example of it, on how NPCI has built this base layer stack, and then private players, like whether it's on the consumer side, whether players like us, have built on top of it and taken it to the masses or taken it to businesses, right? What do you think are the base principles on which digital public infrastructure like this can be replicated on other areas as well? I think, I believe people are talking about how it can be replicated for health. We are already seeing ONDC trying to do it for commerce. But I think UPI is an amazing success story. So there are definitely some learnings on how the public-private collaboration someday works.
Actually, we all took, you know, all of us who started NPCI in early days, you know, took a lot of inspiration from Mr. Nilekani, Mr. Sharma, who were working for Aadhaar. And the way the thought process was to issue billion Aadhaars, you know, billion people trying to authenticate with a biometric heavy packet size at that time. You know, I think it's all started from there, Harshil, I may say that. And when the DPI, because, and I think the credit for this whole architecture goes to the RBI and the government, because they really thought about this creating a layer, right? And today, many countries do not have this kind of foresight to create the central infrastructures or DPIs, what you call about, which are not driven by profit, but driven by impact. And I think the RBI and the government to create this layer envisage the innovation-led kind of policies. And I think it's, whether it's UPI, FASTag, BBPS or RuPay or whatever you want to talk about, is actually outcome of this whole, you know, kind of a great long-term thinking by the regulator and the government. And I think when when you look at, you know, efforts like Aadhaar, efforts like UPI, when there is a specific execution-like agency which has been created like NPCI, I think it was a little easier task for us because, you know, I think the environment was created by the regulator and RBI. They had already thought about that, you know, this is the way the country is going to grow. This country is going to have the digital public good or digital infrastructures. The regulators and the government encouraged lot of fintechs, right? So while the infrastructure layer remains, railroad remains public, lot of private innovation, the architecture supported right from the beginning, right? So lot of use by fintechs, banks on Aadhaar, similarly on UPI. You know, I remember early conversations with you, and, you know, I used to ask you and Shashank that, you know, why UPI is not 95% of your total, well, we were 70 or 80, 75%, something like that. So I'm just saying that, you know, I think it just created a magic because the timing was right, circumstances was right. It was created by the regulator and the RBI, and the policy environment. The second was, you know, the ecosystem built up by itself, right? The fintech, the emergence of fintech, players like you guys and collaboration with the bank actually worked very well. The banks also scale up their system to kind of process this large load. And I think the platform also evolved. You know, if you look at UPI about 8 years back and UPI right now, it has evolved in my assessment. So I think these are the three things which could lead to the DPI. You know, now we take a lot of credit, but I'm saying it's a journey, and I think instead of looking at the past, I think we should look at now, otherwise we miss the train.
I completely agree with you. And I think UPI has its own struggles as well in the early days, and you fought through it and made it a success that it is. I think we all talk about UPI as a success story, but there's a lot of other stuff that NPCI is doing. We talk about RuPay, which is scaling and becoming one of the largest card networks in India. We talk about BBPS. So what are some of the areas outside UPI that excite you within NPCI that you feel will be the next drivers of growth or innovation for NPCI?
So, while UPI is like a flagship platform for NPCI, we are seeing a good growth in, today you look at FASTag. The FASTag is like about 97% of the collection happens electronically. The same highway which used to take 3 weeks to turn around now gets turned around in terms of money, which is paid by the consumer and received by the concessionaires in few hours, right? So I'm saying the same asset is, and plus the collection also has gone 3x, 4x. So I think, and now we look at the use cases like parking and those kind of things. I see that, each one of them has a capability to build up like a platform. Obviously, the volumes may remain with UPI, but I think they will service the niche. Look at the BBPS. I believe after the category expansion of BBPS, I think the sky is the limit in my assessment for BBPS. And today, every invoice can be converted. And today, payment system has a limitation on what data we can carry and how much data we carry. But technically, BBPS like a platform can carry very rich data in the transaction processing, and it has a overall impact on how do you look at that payment, right? Bill payment. How do you leverage that bill payment for the surrounding activities and those kind of things?
Yeah. I think that's amazing. And another, I think similarly, another track that NPCI is pursuing is, and we recently heard to the head of NIPL, what UPI is trying to do on the global front, right? I think with launches in multiple countries and multiple geographies, and we have seen, I think Mauritius, Singapore, I think in almost 7 countries now, and more to go. So how do you see that global footprint that is getting charted out? Also want to understand, what all do you want to achieve on the global side? Is it remittances? Is there more that we can expect UPI to play a role on a global side?
I think, we are not saying, okay, on a cross-border side, we are looking RuPay and UPI both. However, we are looking at the stack which has been built. And that stack can be leveraged by anybody whom they want, under the regulator-to-regulator arrangement or a government-to-government arrangement. Today, thanks to the government and RBI, we have got great success in Mauritius, in UAE now. So I think the objective is whichever country is looking at, building up, do not want to invest 4 or 5 years. So they can get a, kind of speed to market with our stack. The second important part from an India standpoint is building cross-border pipes. I think the regulator and RBI, the government is very clear that at least, if we want to be the top 3 economies in next few years and maybe the second largest economy in next 25 years, we need to have efficient domestic payments is not sufficient. Yeah. What we need is the efficient cross-border payments. So whether it's a 4 neighboring markets or the 3-4 markets where the Indian visit, the UAE, Singapore, Thailand, kind of Malaysia kind of model, we want to create the presence of the platform. So for example, we should see UPI there, we should see RuPay there, so that the consumer is able to understand, merchant is able to understand, and a very, very efficient transaction in the long run can be done, right? And today, the remittances time is a key concern. So that we are trying to solve. Regulator is trying to help build the efficient model on the architecture on the remittance, which didn't exist anywhere in the world. So I think it's a long journey, Harshil. I think the plumbing is just started, but maybe we'll see the fruits in 5 to 7 years' time.
One follow-up on that, right? NPCI is taking their journey with multiple markets. What role do you think fintechs in India could play in that journey, right? Is that an opportunity for Indian fintechs to also go global? And as Razorpay, we are launching in Malaysia. We have launched in Malaysia. We're launching.
You are asking the question that you should be asking yourself.
What
role you want to play? The fintechs in the country will have to decide what role they want to play. It's as simple as that. You know, I don't think NPCI is going to see today. I'm just saying that let's assume that whether it's an online integration or whether it's a QR code deployment, you know, the way partnerships were done in India, I think the pretty much similar model exists most of the world.
Yeah.
So creating a acquiring footprint, for example, creating a value-added services over that, I think it's a very logical in my assessment for the fintechs in India.
No, I completely agree.
And you know, I would be really surprised if we lose that game, right? Because I think the architecture and the globalization of the platforms, the clear thinking of the government and RBI is Indian fintechs will go global. As simple as that.
No, I completely agree. I think
Both outward as well as inward. I'm saying.
yeah. And one of the things that we've seen play out with US companies is that because a lot of technologies on internet came from US companies became the dominant companies on internet.
Great point.
We should do that on fintech,
Absolutely,
right? Now that India fintech is
because if you are going to supply the payment standard to the world, the companies will have to take lead to take that standard and explain to the other countries, right?
Yeah,
In that
we
sense.
are best suited to it. We are already doing it in India for 8-9 years as an industry. We should be able to drive that. So completely agree with you. I'll switch.
Of course, it will need investments, but I think more than investments, I think the startups payment startups are fairly well funded.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of and Harshil, let me tell you one thing. What dilemma you guys must be having is how do we focus, right? How do we focus? India is such a large market, 10x growth, right? How do we focus the global market?
Yeah.
And I think the RBI guided NPCI for that, right? And the same dilemma was there in NPCI as well.
Okay.
So RBI said that no, NPCI, please continue your focus on the domestic market. Please create a separate outfit for the international market so that it gets a focus, it gets a proper CEO, proper team, and that takes the globalization of the product. I'm saying this is a kind of when you have competing forces, you'll have to deal very innovatively.
Yeah.
Unless that happens. I doubt that because there is so much to be done in India.
Yes.
You will always be kind of in double minds that how do I invest outside? So you will have to first create a vision, create the strategy, and provide a structure, in my assessment, which will kind of drive this vision.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's exactly like fintechs like ours are trying to do. But great to hear that that's the model that NPCI is also following. I think I'll jump a little bit towards India fintech side, right? And I think we've seen India fintech as becoming a growth story for the entire ecosystem. And building for fintech is generally hard because on one side you have to drive for innovation, on the other side you have to balance regulation and compliance. What is your advice to fintechs on how to make that balance work right? And I mean, NPCI operates in one of the toughest places there.
You're asking the question, fintech founders takes advice?
We'll have to take advice from you. I take a lot of advice from you. You can't say that to me.
See, the Deputy Governor Ravi Shankar used the word of responsible innovation, right? I think I like the word because when we are into the business of managing other people's money, right, or you are part of that money flow, I think the responsible innovation, adherence to the compliance, risk management, because one thing you have to believe that the scale is crazy, right? I'm just saying that and the scale is crazy, and finally, if there are accidents, I'm saying all of us will hold the RBI and the government accountable. So, I think compliance is for the good, and if and what happens normally that number of times this risk becomes higher with the size, right? The compliance risks are very small when your size is smaller, right? And that's very risky. For the fintechs, that's super risky, right? Because if you don't understand that the compliance risks are going to be higher as you grow up, right? If you understand it very clearly, then you will invest into that area to building up the controls, building up the maker, checker, verifier principles in the system, the domain expertise to understand, what could go wrong, predicting what could go wrong, and start the preparedness on building that. I think is essential because if you want to create if fintech founders like you are here to create a long-term value, I don't see any way out but to build a value long-term without compliance. It's not possible.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And fintech and compliance will always go hand in hand. The another
Because there is a fin ना, otherwise you would have been only tech.
Yes.
आपको अगर innovation ही करना है, compliance नहीं करना है, तो आप खाली tech करो. I'm saying option is there with you, but I'm saying because there is a fintech, there is a fin involved. It's your decision. It's a startup's decision to become a fintech. No, nobody's forcing you, right? I'm just saying.
I think that
But
makes
when you
sense.
want to be in part of the fin, right? It has to be within the rules and regulations and boundaries created by the Reserve Bank of India to protect the common citizen.
So the advice is basically if you want to be in fintech, then you have to focus on the fin part as well, right? So another challenge that all startups face,
And
but
obviously, I keep saying this in everyone that what is not written by in the regulation, the answer is no.
Okay.
Which is the dilemma of most of the fintech founders keeps asking कि ये तो कहाँ मना किया है, ये
So
मना
the
नहीं
gray
किया तो
zone
हम
is
कर
no.
देते हैं. So what is not given approval
Yes.
is a no.
What people call the gray areas.
Gray area. There is no gray area.
There is no gray.
In regulator and government mind, there is no gray area.
no gray.
The gray area is coming in the fintech founders' mind because the tech.
Yes.
The tech overpowers that.
Great advice. I think another area that fintech founders, I mean, all startups these days with funding drying up and becoming less available. I'm not saying not available, but still less available. But specifically in fintech, where it's hard to create sustainable business models, right? Like how do you see fintechs over years shaping up, or what is your advice in some ways for fintechs to build sustainable business models?
Okay, look, I just look at this whole, the infrastructure. It's like an infrastructure creation activity. It takes long to kind of move from a physical society to a digital society, right? And I think the government's objective in ensuring that the payments should be free, affordable, right? Is they want to remove the friction between the guy who's on cash to guy moving to the digital, and that's the objective. So, and all of us must have seen the objective of creating this affordable payments is actually giving us results, right? And I strongly believe that obviously commerce is going to come back. For sure it's going to come back. But before that, I'm saying we must be at least a reasonable digital society, right? That's the, I think, objective of the regulator and the government. And today, and there are 3-4 things comes out of that, right? One is, infrastructure creation takes time. Conversion, resistance has to be, conversion has to be faster, resistance has to be minimal. And once that happens, it also gives us new opportunities like credit, for example, right? It gives us opportunities like the other recurring payments and value-added services which we manage. Actually, recurring payments is like a custodian services, right?
Yeah.
At a high level, right? I'm just saying that today, the whole crypto world makes money as a custodian services. So I'm saying recurring mandates are like players can create a custodian services fee-based model, right? But basic payments has to be free. I think that's what you're saying. But I strongly believe that in the years to come, when there is a confidence in the regulator's mind and the government's mind, that yes, there is, by and large, the society has been digital, then having a reasonable charge would really make sense. And I'm sure the government and RBI will consider that.
Okay, so for now, the advice is to grow big,
Grow
build
the
and
business.
grow
I
on
think
top.
the direction from RBI and the government is, you grow the business as of now.
I think one area that we are talking about a lot these days is AI. I think AI is a buzzword, but at the same time, there's some real value creation happening. We've seen OpenAI doing amazing stuff internationally. We at Razorpay launched a couple of things that use AI to prevent fraud and chargebacks. But what is NPCI's view? Like, are you already trying to figure out how do you leverage AI at country scale, or are there specific areas where you see AI play a role in the fintech adoption as well?
For sure, I think the use of AI is going to be a formidable force in any data-intensive activity, and I believe that payment system generates the second most data after the social media, right? Messaging and those kind of things. So it's bound to look at the payment system going to use AI in a big way, whether it's decision making, whether it's the rewards, whether it's incentivization, changing the habits, fraud and risk. So most of the areas and also hyper personalization, right? When you look at the customer UIs and those kind of things, I believe many companies have started using it. Of course, NPCI is also using it. Very early days for us, but we are using the AI for the risk, fraud and risk management and couple of those initiatives. But I think it's just going to happen. I'm just saying that if we don't use it, somebody else will, right? So we just have to wait and see the impact. But I think the impact is already seen. I think many fintechs are now using AI, and I think it's dramatically, the only way you can go n is equal to 1. The only way you can do n is equal to 1 with AI. It's otherwise not possible. The scale in India is so crazy. The n is so large, right? I'm saying if you want to do n is equal to 1, I'm saying you need AI.
Yeah. One last track I want to cover if we have limited time is your personal journey as this leader of this large institution, NPCI, which is driven innovation. And whenever I meet fintech founders, we joke a lot that how NPCI is doing more innovation than fintechs in the last 2 years. And most of the time, the fintechs are catching up and creating on that. How have you created this culture of innovation inside NPCI? And how are you driving that culture? Because you're operating at a very large scale, at a country scale today, and you still keep innovating with credit cards and UPI, credit line and UPI, so many new things that keep coming out from NPCI every couple of months. How do you drive that culture and the team together?
No. I first of all, I'm not really happy about NPCI's speed of innovation.
Probably that's the reason it
I'm
happens.
saying I'm not really happy, and I don't want this to be an appraisal session, including myself and my team. But I think we should, and the way I look at it, Harshil, that I'm saying if we want to grow 10x from here, what we have right now, is definitely not going to be sufficient to grow 10x. So what are we doing to build that future of 10x, right? And I think the efforts are still falling short in my personal assessment. A lot more to be done. And I just hope, and when we look at NPCI, it's an opportunity for all of us, right? I'm saying that there are many capable fintechs, capable people, but we at NPCI are really lucky and blessed, right, to get this opportunity to work for the organization like this, right, which has a very high on purpose, such a high, the scale at which we are allowed to operate. So I think it's a great opportunity, and I just hope that, every day I keep thinking that we are able to make true to this opportunity.
So basically, because you are always unhappy, that's probably the reason that the team keeps driven. I think we have last 3 minutes. We can probably take 1 or 2 questions at max. I think if anyone has some, I have a lot of, and I can keep going on with Dilip, but if anyone has.
If you're asking audience to ask, I have a right to answer or not.
Of course, you have. Dilip will choose whether he answers it or not. So.
And Bangalore is the tech capital. Please ask tech questions.
Somebody there.
Don't ask environmental questions.
Yeah, please stand up, and I think we can pass on the mic. Guys, you have the mic there? Yeah, it's coming.
Hi, sir. Good evening. I represent a company called eFunds, which is into a lending platform. So largely, my understanding is that today we are talking about financial technology, fintech, banking technology. So banks are also now moving to technology. So way forward, what will be the differentiation between the fintech and the bank?
Interesting.
So I think the way I look at it, I think the divide between the fintech and bank is blurring, right? The startups wanting to become a fintech and trying to become a banks, and banks are trying to become a more tech, like a fintech, right? So I personally don't think there is going to be much difference, approaching to the market, right? Both needs to have a similar processes. You could always say that, and technically why the fintech exists is because banks have not enough invested in tech over the period. But now you would have seen all the leading banks, right, investing very heavily back on tech. Similarly, the fintechs, they have invested in tech, but not on the fin part. So now they are understanding and investing back on the fin side, compliance. We spoke few things, right? Yes. So I'm saying that finally it's going to be very similar. What you're going to see after 5 years is going to be very similar players. Their imagery to the consumer is going to be very, very similar in my assessment. Of course, you know, the money management part would remain as a very tightly regulated for the right reasons.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the consumer experience is the open field for both fintech and banks in that sense. And in my assessment, both will try to project to the consumer a very similar image.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think-
Thank you so much.
I think we have time for one more question. I think there's somebody here. We can pass the mic quickly.
Just because you said you will take tech questions, I raised my hand, right? See, we are talking of a digital society. India, by and large, is getting digital at a very, very rapid scale, right? And if you're talking about 10x and maybe 100x in certain spaces, what is your opinion on, how much efficient we need to get into the actual physical infrastructure that runs this, right? What I mean by that is, think of the discussion.
IT backend and those kind of things?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's important that those things are addressed now. By the time we reach that scale, we are not really struggling with it. And AI, for one, right, is going to consume power which is many orders of magnitude higher than what it is today. What's your take on that? And I come from a silicon company, so it's a vested.
No, I think it's a great question. And you know, to be honest, I don't know the answer, but let me try to see whether there are two activities, right? One is the market creation, and second is whether you are ready for that created market, right? So whether how much future you will invest, right? See, in my assessment now, the situation 5-7 years back and situation now is fairly good in my assessment, right? And obviously there are good things and bad things also. Let me talk about good things first. So, you know, with the emergence of open source, with the emergence of cloud architectures, both private, public, even if you are good enough, if your core architectures are good, right, you would be able to scale up in no time, right? I'm just saying that, you could leverage the horizontal scaling, you could leverage, pay-per-use models very effectively, and overnight you would have the ability to scale up. And technically, what we are talking about is cost of, the servers are like commodity, right? You keep, you get a 5 lakh rupees a server and just keep putting up on the racks, and I'm saying just keep on scaling as you need, right? In that sense. Similarly, the software creation using, I'm sure a number of you would have put up the models which will actually help you to validate the code, write code. Obviously there are some issues on the IP infringement and those kind of things, but I'm sure you're taking care of, even building part of it, you are well assisted. While you can't eliminate human completely, but I'm saying that you're well assisted from that perspective. So you are also able to kind of leverage that to build up faster, right? I'm just saying whether it's a feature, whether it's scalability, whether it's observability. So I think situation is much better than what it was before. However, how much to do it, again, it's a founder's call, but I definitely feel that if your base architecture is solid, right? I think the growing up, and when I say base architecture is fully, and Arif taught me this when he was in NPCI, the DevOps and those kind of practices. Similarly, on the AI side, MLOps. So I'm saying if you have base story right, base architecture right, I think, you don't have to invest too much ahead of the time, and you can be just right, just good enough, just at the right time, you would be able to deal with that problem.
Thank you. I think Dilip said he can do one more question. He's been kind enough, so we'll have one more. Maybe probably somebody in the back. Okay, I think you have somebody.
Hello, sir. My name is Ravi Sutanshini. I'm a fintech content creator.
Server mein bula, Dilip bula do, please.
Nahi, sir. So I came from Dubai yesterday just for this event, and I used UPI in Dubai. What a fantastic development. And there has been JCB offer for heavy promotion of RuPay outside India. But since UPI is expanding very heavily, is there any promotional plan to promote UPI? People ask कि बहुत ज़्यादा UPI चल रहा है, लेकिन उनको पता नहीं है कि use कैसे करना है.
So again, great question, Ravi. Yeah, the way, and I think and Ritesh was here and he must have spoken about, but I think the mandate from NPCI board, RBI and the government to NPCI International is, I think the promotion part will come. It's like a retail principle, I'm saying first the visibility has to be there. I think the first effort, what he's looking at is 7 close by markets, the 4 neighboring markets, the UAE, Singapore, Thailand. We will have to create a visibility first. I think that's the first step. And once this visibility is created in, for example, 6-9 months' time, I think then the promotion and activation will start, right? Because the visibility, affordability, and availability are the retail principles, and I think the digital payments also more or less follows the same, whether it's an online marketplace or a physical marketplace. So I think the visibility has to come first, and I'm sure the promotions is not a bigger issue in our assessment. But very happy that you could do the UPI in UAE. Very glad. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so. I had seen your UPI ATM video also. It went
so
very
much,
viral.
sir. Really privileged.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dilip. I think you've been very kind with your time, and I think as fintechs, we can just hope that we can continue to match up the innovation that NPCI brings under your leadership. But thanks a lot for coming here. I think it means a lot to the Bangalore fintech ecosystem, and we hope we can continue to innovate on top of whatever NPCI builds next.
Bangalore is our source of inspiration. Our advisor, the Mr. Nilakinis lives here.
Yes.
He's the one who came up with the UPI as
Yes,
a
of course.
thought process.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.